What's up, guys? Josh McKinney here. I just want to welcome you to episode 102 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. Just got done having a chat with Thomas Rozdzynski, and it is really good. I really think you guys should not sleep on this one. If you guys have never listened to Roll Radio and you don't know who Thomas is, I would highly recommend checking out Roll Radio. I would say that it's one of the closest to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show podcasts that I've ever heard because of their focus on the show. I feel like a lot of times there isn't a lot of focus on Jiu-Jitsu podcasts. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Just a lot of times the interviews are just about kind of getting to know someone. You know, we always try to interview people with the goal of them teaching us something. And that is very much how Roll Radio is. And so I cannot recommend that podcast for you guys enough. And listen to this one first, though, because it'll make you excited to listen to Roll Radio. I feel like Thomas does a really good job explaining what his opinions, his views on jiu-jitsu are. They're very closely related to mine. So that always makes me excited when I get to talk to somebody about stuff like that. And it's a really good episode. But before we jump in, I just want to remind you guys that the Patreon page is live. If you guys want to have access to our exclusive show, Suck Less Saturday, be sure to go to our Patreon page for the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, and you will be able to check that out. What Suck Less Saturday is a 5 to 15 minute episode that is just me. We talk about a mindset in jiu-jitsu. The first 4 episodes it's actually a series. It's 4 parts. They are out now, and the first one on the 4 pillars of jiu-jitsu, the first one on connection is free. So if you have any thought of like, I've always gotten free stuff from Josh, I don't know if he's worth paying for, check out the first episode and let me know what you think by either just Xing out the page or signing up for the Patreon page. So that's pretty much all I have. Let's just jump right into the episode. All right, I am sitting down with my new friend Thomas, and I just wanted to start this out. First, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I wanted to start out. I thought this would be fun. I always do the normal prep work for a podcast, especially with somebody I've never met before, Googling things about them, trying to learn more about them. And one of the main things that I found is you are more obsessed with content creation than even I am. And I was just looking at all the different avenues that you have. You have your podcast, you have your online academy, you have so many different things. Could you just kind of give us an overview of some of the jiu-jitsu related things that you do?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm more obsessed than you, or I feel like there's so many other phenomenal content creators out there today that it's really the quality of content is really what matters. But yeah, I mean, you're right. You have a point. There is, several years ago, as my academy was open, and we focus a lot on hands-on approach to jiu-jitsu. Today, I think the media and some of the tools that we have accessible on our phones and on our laptops give students more opportunities to engage, and as a result of it, as instructors, we have more opportunity to stimulate them and bring more success to them. So yeah, about a year and a half ago, sometime during COVID, we started our podcast, the Roll Radio. That's going, it's going phenomenal guests and phenomenal conversations, and it allows us to, touch more people, if you will, within jiu-jitsu arena. And then yes, Roll TV is another platform that we create a lot of content from a visual perspective, more of an educational perspective, as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned. So not only allowing our students to learn jiu-jitsu hands-on on the mat here at the academy, but also stimulating them from a visual perspective at home, or giving them opportunities to review. And at this point, the platform is growing quite extensively. And we have individuals outside of the academy reaching out and really connecting and using the tool So I like to think about it. These are the different ways how we can engage with students around the world, to really help them out, to help create, opportunities for them to learn more and more efficiently, if you will, as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned.
What was the startup of the podcast? Like, what was the thought process behind it? Was it for me, I know for me, my big push towards my podcast when COVID started was more boredom than anything, but then it turned into something. For you, was it more calculated, or what started your podcast?
Yeah, so it's actually an individual story, and I think we told that story with my partner once or twice on the podcast itself. But it's I honestly, similar to you, it was just completely bored out of our minds. And during that period where academy was closed, we couldn't train, but we were trying to stimulate our students. And honestly, we had to do something, and I'm very busybody. I like to engage and do things and be busy, and my OCD is kicking in all the time, so I have to be doing things. And that was difficult. It was difficult to sit and almost do nothing. When you're used to being at the academy every single day for a number of hours and engaging with students, engaging with people, sharing philosophies and what you do, and now that's taken away from you. It puts you in a very challenging position, a very challenging time. So one, it was out of the boredom, but two, we were thinking like, well, what can we do for the students to continue staying connected? How can we bring more value during this difficult time? So I remember sitting down, at home and saying, right now I'm bored out of my mind. Like, I can watch only so much of videos, I can watch only so much, read so many books, but what can we do to help? And I remember going to my co-host and and say, hey, listen, we're gonna start a podcast. Are you in or out? And he's like, yeah. Another one of your 50 crazy ideas that you have. I was like, no, are you in or you out? Like, and he was like, you're really serious about this, right? And I was like, yeah, no, let's do it. And he's like, well, we've never done anything like this. I was like, I know, I already ordered equipment. We have everything. So anyway, we start doing research and we start, learning how to do this. And very quickly, we received, positive response from these conversations, and just talking to these different individuals, mostly black belts, but not only, who share jiu-jitsu stories, and is not necessarily about gold medals or winning. It's actually more about the struggles, more about, what does it take to get to the gold medal? What happened when it didn't go my way? What happened when I can't train? And a lot of these simple things really, I think, help students to get through them, when we find ourselves in that point of time, in that position, when things are out of our control. And ultimately, jiu-jitsu is kind of dealing with these situations out of our control most of the time. Our partners inflicting their own plan, their own motions, their own transitions. We have to adapt very quickly and troubleshoot, if you will. So in some way, that's how it started, and very quickly grew. And now I get to hang out with you and and chat. So
so we got connected through somebody who was a mutual guest on our podcast, Todd Fox, and he recommended you to me, and I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. And as soon as, so I listened to his episode, of course, and then was like, that's interesting. They have 2 episodes on Todd. That's different. Well, I looked it up, and you guys kind of do almost a decompress episode after every interview. And it was really, really interesting. And as I listened to more episodes, I found something in common between the 2 of our podcasts. And you kind of already brought it up. And it is the excessive focus on problem solving. And where that comes from in jiu-jitsu. And it's something I always mention on the podcast is something that's common, right? It's something that's part of what jiu-jitsu is. If you can't be a good problem solver, you will not be good at jiu-jitsu. But for you started your podcast. What were some troubles that you had to overcome? Some some problems that you had to solve just in starting, just kind of in the early episodes of your podcast, or even now?
I think, when we look at, even this conversation, like there, as a listener, and I've listened to many different podcasts. I have some, some, I'm a fan of a handful of them, and there's some phenomenal guys who bring a podcast content on a content in a podcast format. It never occurred to me what it really takes to do something like this, right? We often take things for granted. And so I think in the very beginning, the difficulty was really understanding what does it take to really do this. Like it's so beyond just a conversation, but even coordinating schedules, finding a guest. I mean, I have a list of probably 200 people that I would like to talk to. However, like only one of them is available, because we are so busy. So,
Uh-huh.
excuse me, there's all these dynamics that you really have to, navigate through. And just having a conversation with somebody, what is productive conversation where we can actually chit chat, not necessarily a question answer. That at least in my mind is what brings the value. Telling a story or having a conversation, exchange of thoughts and words and comments. That really what creates a creative and a valued content to somebody who is listening. So just that on its own was a big learning curve,
Mhm.
and then I'm not even mentioning things like technology. I'm not even mentioning things like internet going up and down, and that's out of your control, or you're trying to do these things. And
Uh-huh.
I think tools like video conferencing has improved in the last 2 years, but like if I look back in a year and a half ago, these tools were not as robust as they are today. I mean, these
Mhm.
companies really invested a lot of money to make these tools more accessible and by far more stable, because of the pandemic. However, on the beginning of this, about a year and a half ago, we had some troubles. We had some difficulties, and I'm a bit like, as I mentioned in the beginning, my OCD always kicks in. I'm always trying to bring highest quality product. I always think about it. If it's not quality, might as well not do it, right? Why do something half production of half, just kind of doing it just because. So that was important part to me and my partner as we were exploring the podcast platform and just all these logistics that are associated with it. We always wanted to create a good quality content, but also not only from a guest perspective, but also from a quality perspective. So things like microphones, I mean, a video, how is this being produced? Who's going to view this? So there's a lot to it.
That is, yes, I totally agree. There is a ton to podcasting. Something else I wanted to ask about your podcast and your academy and your online academy, they all share the same name. So Roll is not ROLL like we think of it. It is spelled differently. What does that name mean?
Yeah, so this goes back about 6, 7 years ago when my academy was being opened, or when we really we're thinking of opening academy. Branding is important part of who you are and what you do and how it's being structured and then received by the other side, by your clients, by people who view you. So as the academy was opening up, we wanted to make something very quick, very quick in the name, very easy to remember, something catchy, and we went through, I mean, hundreds of different ideas what to name the company. I didn't want to put my name on it. I wanted to be something that's um, on its own, independent in a way, right? And as we were going through these ideas, we always kept coming back to rolling. We just want to roll. We just want to roll. We just want to roll. And at that point, a partner of mine at that point, he said he started looking up like old English dictionaries, all English wordage, and he came up with this idea. Hey, listen, he found it somewhere, and I don't even know exactly where, but he found it somewhere where rolling, what we know today, rolling as a ball rolling down the hill, in an old, very, very old English was spelled ROL with a little apostrophe over the O. And I was like, gold right there, done. This is it, and then we start creating, and then it hit us. Well, wait a minute. We need to see if this is available as far as the domains are concerned, if this is not copyrighted or, well, so we start looking into it. But thankfully, it was unique enough where we were able to inquire that, and we were able to seal that as a part of the brand. And now, as the company continues growing, we have Roll Radio, we have Roll TV. Everything is branded under the Roll umbrella, to creating, the same branding in a way, easy, accessible, easy to remember, easy to find, because ultimately, you do want to be recognized in this clutter of things that are happening today, especially online, right?
Is your academy, is it doing well now? Is it kind of able to run again, and you're able to teach again?
Yeah. So we are teaching. We look at this as a kind of a new world. Things. We are not the same. Things are not the same after the pandemic. And again, whether one believes in it or doesn't believe it, agrees with it, doesn't really, it's irrelevant. I think, despite it doesn't matter what our opinions are, this thing impacted, I think, every jiu-jitsu practitioner in the world. Regardless of our opinions. There was an impact, that a lot of academies suffered during that time, unfortunately, but I think a lot of them this year actually regained a lot of that traction. And I think a lot of them are more successful right now than they used to be pre-pandemic, because simply, when we are stuck in this position of being at home for a year and a half without much interaction, after doing jiu-jitsu, it's very difficult not to go back to it. And I think this last year put a lot of people in a position where they start thinking, where I have not been able to do this thing. I always wanted to try it. I couldn't do it for whatever reason. This is the time to do it. So I think there is a lot of people reaching out and trying jiu-jitsu. There's, I think, a lot of people going back to jiu-jitsu. So to answer your question directly, we're doing phenomenal. I think, my academy particularly, is doing great. Classes are doing well. Safety is always our highest concern. But at this point, we are doing good. I think, end of the year is coming up. The winter is coming up here in Chicago. So we'll see how all this is going to unfold in the next few months. But I am very confident that next year is going to be even better than this year was. And I really look around, and all the academy owners, this is a pivot point. I think there's going to be a lot of success around Jiu-Jitsu academies.
I completely agree. We're both of our academies are in Illinois. I'm further away from you, but we kind of had to deal with a lot of the same stuff, and it was tough. But it is the typical, hard times create tough people, and I think that was a really good thing that has come just in the last 2 years. Is you've had to have people rise up and kind of be tough. So just to shift a little bit, something that we kind of talked about in prep for this. I really liked this video. I watched a bunch of your kind of mindset videos, and I think that there's not enough mindset training in jiu-jitsu a lot of the time. A lot of people just think of jiu-jitsu as, hey, it's a list of techniques, and it just is not. And something that you had a really good video on was about finding and being the right training partner. And so I just kind of wanted to pick your brain, or at least start picking your brain on that. And just first off, I want to ask you, if you were brand new in a gym and you were going in and you wanted some tips on finding somebody who could be my training partner, what should you look for?
Yeah, this is the tricky part, right? So this is, when I look at individuals or students who come into the academy, whether mine or not, doesn't matter, where they're stepping onto the mat for very, very first time, I think of, this is the most challenging moment in their life, or one of them, Right. So let's kind of take a step back here before we get to the partners. Let's talk about what average person will deal with as they are coming into academy, right? So very likely they did some research. They might not know what jiu-jitsu is, but they know it's a physical contact sport. They know it has something to do with fighting or self-defense, some of those dynamics. If they do more research, they probably know of Joe Rogan and UFC and maybe ADCC and whatever, some of these larger organizations. But no matter what, their expectation might be very different to what's actually happening on the mat, right? So often students or individuals walking into the academy, they have a fear of getting hurt. I want to try this, but what happens if I get hurt? I don't want to get hurt. I have to go to do my job. I have to attend my family and all the other things. So there is that first trigger of getting hurt. Two, they often come into the academy and they say, well, I'm the guy who doesn't know anything. There's probably 20, 30 people on the mat, and I'm the only one who doesn't know anything. I'm the guy who's at the bottom of the whole pit, right? So that's anxiety of its own, right? And then, we have this subconscious need of being right, in my opinion. So by nature, as humans, I think we want to be right. We don't want to be wrong. We don't want to somebody point at us and say, hey, you're wrong, right? You did this incorrectly. So there's these 3 triggers when people are walking into academy, and all this creates a very difficult situation. Should they come in or should they not? Maybe I'll wait. And I think often this is where reasonings in our mind is like, well, I'm going to just wait with this jiu-jitsu thing when blah, blah, blah happens, and this could be I lose weight, I get stronger, my schedule loosens up, I'm not as stressed out. And, this is where things layer, and then, so let's just say that they are in the right mindset. I'm going to try this. I'm making this first step. I'm getting into academy, and they walking onto the mat, and everything is fun and pleasant. And then they have to pair themselves up with a partner. And this is the second pivot point of their first day, quote unquote, right? Where they have to be paired up, so who is this guy? I don't know them. Who is this lady? I don't know them. She's larger, she's smaller, she's more experienced. Well, she's going to smash me. And then we go back to those 3 things in the very beginning. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to be wrong. And I don't want to be embarrassed. And it is very, very hard, and I think to solve this is really not on the client. It's not on the student, actually. My opinion is that this is where the academy as a facility, as an operation, needs to do a phenomenal job to bring these individuals in and really show them that jiu-jitsu is safe. If done correctly, it is safe. There's no need to be embarrassed, because I might be on the mat. I've been on the mat for 20 plus years, but you know what? There was 20 plus years ago, there was this day just like you are today. So I know exactly how you feel. Will you be wrong? Let's work on that. Let's figure this out, right? And day by day by day, I think we get more comfortable in these uncomfortable positions, and we start loving it. Because over 20 years on the mat, I don't know if I've met one person who didn't like jiu-jitsu after they tried it. Often there's another reason why they stopped training, but not because they didn't like it. So there is something behind that physical engagement, troubleshooting, continuous mind stimulation, So going back to your original question, when I'm the brand new student and I'm coming into academy, I would encourage you to talk to the instructor, talk to the facility managers, talk to the higher belts and say, listen, I have no idea what I'm doing, and can you please help me? I am confident if that facility has their program set correctly, and if they are set for success, they will guide you correctly. They will find you a partner that is right for you. And if they don't, well, perhaps maybe that's not a facility for you. I mean, we often don't talk about that part. Not every facility, not every jiu-jitsu academy is for everybody, right? There are different flavors and types and focuses behind different jiu-jitsu academies. So me going into a wrong one, I'm going to get annoyed. 2, I could get hurt. I might be embarrassed. Honestly, I'm not going to learn much. And then I'm going to start hating, not that place, but I'm going to start hating jiu-jitsu. And that's the last thing we want, right? So doing the research ahead of time and really understanding what the facility has to offer, it is, I think, critical to the success of the person coming into the facility and really trying this. So little research really could take one really far and setting them for success.
That is really good. If somebody didn't try jujitsu, just to follow up on that, and they were researching the different academies in their area, or maybe they moved somewhere new and they were researching, or they quit the gym that they were at, they felt like it wasn't safe, but now they are looking, they're shopping for a new academy. What would be some things you would tell a person to look for?
Yeah, so safety and hygiene, I think, is in the top, in my opinion. And next one following that would be instructions and see how the classes are structured. And we've talked on my podcast about this a lot to different individuals, different instructors, but just because somebody's a world champion does not make them a phenomenal coach or phenomenal instructor. Being an instructor is a skill set of its own. And by no means I'm not claiming I'm the best out there, but there's a chemistry that's taking place between an instructor and a student. And that chemistry has to be on the same wavelength, right? And then we look at things like goals. Can this instructor teach? Can they relay information so I can receive that information, right? Do they keep me accountable? How is the class structured, right? And what I'm leaning at this is somebody who, let's just say, is 65 years old and is retired or maybe at the end of their career, cannot go into an academy which is competition oriented and have an expectation of 2 hours of training, full intensity. I mean, that's not setting them for success, right? And at the same time, if there is somebody who is competing very heavily and going into a class which is oriented around 60-year-olds, it again is not setting them for success. So I think looking at the offering, what individuals academies have, it's really, really important to your success. Some do some do others, some do all of it, some don't do any of it. But before we get into any of this, how classes are being taught, in my opinion, hygiene, how clean the facility is, how professional the facility are. Because end of the day, I mean, you are a client. That means you are paying money for a service. Let's think about it. What happens when your cell phone goes off for 2 days and there's no reason, you're still paying for it, you cannot use it? Or what if your internet goes down and you're paying for it? There's a contention point, right? And I think academies often are being viewed as not as a business, as a kind of hangout spot because we create these relationships, but it's important to view them as a business. Like, they are providing a service, how good of the service is, right? And so there's a very fine balance between all of these little triggers, all of these little points, and finding one that works for them is super important, super important.
That is really good. I think that is something that, like you talked about, like we were just saying, that it's very uncomfortable to have any thought about not training at the gym that you train at. It's very like, it's in jujitsu, you're taught that morally it is wrong, right? But it does not necessarily mean anything bad. A lot of times we look at a school and say, hey, this just does not fit what I want. I want to be the best competitor in the world, and we're doing knife defense. It's probably not a very good fit for me. I think that is really, really good stuff. On back just onto the note of finding training partners, and more on the note of being a training partner. If you are somebody who is a little further into your jiu-jitsu journey, what are some tips on being a better training partner with whoever you're drilling with, rolling with, or just partnered with?
Yeah, so I think being a training partner breaks down into few subcategories, a few categories here, right? One is we want to stimulate our partner and challenge them on a certain level, right? So if you and we are training and I'm just a dead fish, I'm not helping you in any capacity, right? That, I think, that is more important than the other side, which is often viewed, meaning by being good training partner, quote unquote, I'm not going to hurt you, right? That's what often is being discussed, and I truly believe, and maybe I'm a little naive on this, but I truly believe that the majority of academies nobody goes into steps on the mat with an intent of hurting somebody.
Mhm.
You know, most accidents, most injuries happen by accident, completely accidental. Something didn't go according to plan and it just happened. And they're unfortunate and they do happen. That's important to know too. They do happen, right? But they're not vicious and they're not, most of them, they're not with a clear intent of hurting somebody, right? So if we eliminate that point, that we are all good training partners, accidents might happen, we are cautious about them, we have points of awareness, what to do, you know, in some of those compromised positions. I think where good training partner comes in is the stimulating part. How far am I going to push you mentally and physically where you gaining benefits of jiu-jitsu, right? So some things to think about. You know, if I'm a dead fish, am I helping you? If I go 110%, am I helping you? Right? I mean, these are it's completely opposite side of the spectrum, but the happy medium is somewhere in the middle. So good training partner, somebody who will understand what your goal is. That is super important in my opinion. And what I mean by this, if you want to explore specific technique, I should be focusing on that technique with you and putting you in the positions where you can experiment with it, right? If you want to be pushed a little bit more physically, well, this is where I could pick up the pace and match your pace and we are exchanging, right? And there is a physical interaction, right? What if you want to focus on a concept? Well, me locking my guard and holding out for dear life, I don't know if I would consider a good training partner, right? I mean, letting go of that guard maybe and letting you explore the concept of passing guard or getting to the side is really me working with you. Now, let's be honest. The moment we slap hands and bump it, you know, things happen and we just start increasing the intensity and the life is good. And I think, and I love that part of jiu-jitsu too. But you know, when it comes to being good training partner, I think we really need to understand what our partner needs in order for us to accommodate some of that to maximize their success. And it's a two-way street. Just like I'm trying to help you, you should be trying to help me. And I think often is, you know, students think that the higher or more experienced belt or individual can help them more. And I think often the lower or less experienced individuals are underestimated as far as the ability to help, you know. And I made few videos on our YouTube channel, you know, how to train with higher belts, but also I made one how to train with lower belts. And I think there's a value behind each if you understand what to look for, right? From a higher belt perspective, I definitely want to maybe read what they are doing. I want to see how they troubleshoot and so on. I want to get inside their head. I want to see how I can benefit from that, right? Because I already know if I go with somebody who has 5 years more of experience than I am, I'm going to get smashed. I mean, this is what it is. Like, you know, but if I look at this from different perspective, I look at this, listen, I want to troubleshoot this. I want to see what he's doing. I want to read their mind. That's bringing me different value. Now, if I look at somebody who's less experienced, these are the guys who are less predictable. These are the guys who create situations that are, you know, not so in the jiu-jitsu bubble. You know, their troubleshooting is more of a survival mode. You know what I mean? They tend to go a little bit less controlled, if you know what I mean. Not vicious, but less controlled. So that introduces a very different concept. This is where my ability to experiment comes in handy. This is where I can try things. You know, this is where I can see what happens if, you know. So I think there was a value behind training with everyone, but really understanding what the goals are on each side is critical to the success for both of the partners.
So I'll have two questions off that. First of we talked a lot, or you talked a lot in those in both of the things we were just talking about goal setting. And this one's probably a little easier. Is that something that you try to encourage your students to conversate with each other? Hey, make sure you guys know each other's goals. Make sure you have that. Is that something that you try to kind of push?
Yeah, so I'm a huge on goals. I think it's learning, brainless learning of anything will take us only so far. Essentially, we're memorizing things. Which true success comes in, and this is not jiu-jitsu. Forget about jiu-jitsu for a moment. This is education itself. Sooner we understand the concept, but really truly understand why this works the way how it does. How can I execute this, right? What are the principles behind these motions or these actions that we are trying to take? Sooner we can start plug and playing these different components, and now we're creating our own. They call it, you have your own system, you have your own game, you have your own, your jiu-jitsu. Sooner we understand the concept, sooner we can start creating these things. And we are creative creatures. So the problem is not that we can't create. The problem is we don't understand what we're trying to create. And we are stuck in this never-ending circle of, well, I don't know what to do now. And what's next? And then I'm struggling, I'm getting smashed, and jiu-jitsu sucks, and I'm gonna quit. And it's like, so anyway, going back to the original question of yours, I'm a huge fan of goals. And goals really could vary. And I think what's difficult about jiu-jitsu, that measuring jiu-jitsu is extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just knowing whether I'm making progress or not, it is very challenging, right? And that comes from variety of reasons, but some of the factors to consider is, one, your and mind brain work differently. Two, there was an age factor. We all different ages, we have different, our bodies are different, more experience, time and commitment, right? I mean, if I'm a doctor and I work 60 hours a week in a hospital, my jiu-jitsu is probably twice a week at the best. I'm probably lucky. And then versus, hey, listen, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I have all the time in the world and I can do whatever I want. So, all these components. So measuring our success is very challenging. So we have to find something to anchor on. So I often find, I encourage my students to measure jiu-jitsu in a little bit more tangible way. So what is your success? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to increase your physical aspect? Are you trying to understand the concept? Are you trying to memorize or troubleshoot specific position? All these things put us in a point where we can start measuring things a little bit better. And it's still difficult, but it's a little bit better than just going into completely pitch dark room and hoping that we're not going to stumble on, or trip. So I often encourage the students to find goals, what those goals are. And this is where I think instructors come in really powerful, suggesting some of those goals based on knowing the students, but two, really try to put yourself in a position where you can achieve these goals, right? And I call this, YouTube vortex, but it's jiu-jitsu is so broad, and it's so, I often say jiu-jitsu is not difficult, it's complex. And these are two slightly different words, right? I think jiu-jitsu can be simple in a sense of understanding what is happening. I think there's many layers, and more layers you have, more complex it becomes. So, understanding what we are trying to do is really, really important. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense to me. It's funny that you talk about that. Something I talk about on the show is the difference between easy and simple. The same way you used it in the opposite, the difference between complex and difficult. But just on that, you kind of already touched on this. I was going to ask you if there is somebody who is struggling to set a goal. Are there any questions that you can think of, or any thoughts that you can give them to be able to find the next goal that they should set, or a goal that they should set?
Yeah, and I think this is where instructors come in powerful. I'm a strong believer that instructor is a guide, is not the guy who's going to give you all the answers. When I look at my students particularly, I don't want to give them all the answers. I want to set them. I want to create a path for them where they can find their own answers. And I think that is very different mindset. Meaning, I don't know what to do in this situation. Well, let's take a look at the situation. Let's take a look what is happening here. I want to teach you how to troubleshoot versus give you the answer. because that is setting you for success in the long run, right? And the same thing is going as far as the goals are concerned. You know, if you are looking for a new goal, this is where a conversation will come in. You know, say, well, where are you now? What are you trying to do? Why are you here? Like, why are you doing jiu-jitsu? You know, because if you're here, I mean, call me crazy, but if your goal for jiu-jitsu is, let's say, self-defense, and I'm teaching you berimbolo, well, I think we are not even on the same planet, right? But if your goal is to do self-defense, well, then let's talk about balance. Let's talk about distance control. Let's talk about grips. Let's talk about some of these things, and then we can start setting some of the goals, right? Or maybe you want to compete. Oh, okay, we're going to worlds. Oh, phenomenal. Well, where's your conditioning? Where are some of those components that will come in handy for you, right? Probably a knife defense is not going to be really productive in that. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
really, this is where I think instructors are coming really powerful to really knowing their student. That's one, but two, understanding what they are trying to achieve. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes students don't know what they are trying to achieve, and that's fine too. That's, I think, part of the discovery. You know, I think that's part of the beauty of jiu-jitsu. You know, it happens all the time where, you know, I'll do privates, and students will ask me, what I want to learn blah 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 blah, and I was like, okay, well, let's dig into it, and then they're like, yeah, no, I don't like this anymore. Or, I thought you wanted to learn, you know what I mean? So it is, I think instructors and higher belts in the academy come in really powerful, some of these things, to set the student not only for the path towards the success, but also help them move along and really understand why things happen from a positive and negative perspective.
So in communicating with your students a lot, do you like to ask a lot more questions than make statements? Because it seems like that is in your conversations that you were talking is just kind of directing a lot of the conversations with questions. Would that be correct?
Well, I think I think what's important really to keep in mind that some students want to be challenged mentally, right? And this is where I think asking a lot of questions and allow them to troubleshoot is important, right? Some students need a little bit more narrow guidance, you know, maybe put your hand here, you know, or good job on this. But I think what you're saying is somewhere, you know, right in the money. I'm more inclined to ask you 20 questions and guide you with these questions for you to find the answer, versus me flat out tell you, do these 3 steps and your escape is ready. You know, I think the complex part about jiu-jitsu is that it's continuous circumstance changing, right? So what I mean by this is, if I'm on the bottom and you are smashing me, one movement of your arm could change the entire situation. The circumstances have changed now, and I have to reevaluate, and I have to think again what I'm going to do, right? So it's a continuous troubleshooting, which what you mentioned early on during this conversation is like ongoing troubleshooting at any given time while everything is changing, and we have to navigate through these things. So ability for a student to troubleshoot is critical to the success.
Do you, with your students, do you notice that the ones that ask or that grasp that earlier on get better much faster?
Yeah, I do. And it is actually, that's a very interesting part of being an instructor, when you observing students and you seeing kind of, you step back and you see the larger picture. You know, you'll see different personalities, you'll find different professions, you know, you'll find some individuals who their retention of information is by far larger than others. You will find some students, their comprehension is by far better than others. You know, there are some individuals who have, you know, their obstacle is not comprehension or retention, is the mobility. So ability for them to execute some of the things is just harder. Like the mechanical part of it is just hard. And so I think when you step back as an instructor, you see these different personalities, these different individuals. But to what you were saying is, the individuals who can troubleshoot or learn how to troubleshoot early on, those find more success in the longer run. They are less likely to give up. They are less likely to be frustrated. They are less likely to find themselves in these compromised positions, simply because their ability, they don't necessarily know more. Just
Mhm.
their ability to solve problem is much different than others.
So because I'm kind of curious as to kind of how you relay this, how you get this, or try to attempt to get your students to understand problem solving. Do you guys do like a curriculum at your gym?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So it's, we have several different programs at the academy, from judo to striking to jiu-jitsu. We even have what we call street jiu-jitsu, which is, well, think about it, I guess, as raw as it would get. It's targeted towards police officers and individuals of that nature, who could use this a little bit more fight situation. But all of the programs, they have curriculum, and I think curriculum is important. I know some disagree with it, and some flow it and shoot off the hip, and that's fine too. And I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, finding academy that fits you. Some academies have curriculum, some don't, right? But in my opinion, giving a student a clear path and expectations of what is coming in, it is critical to their success. So if you come into my academy, curriculums are listed out. They are in the hallway. They are visible to everybody. You'll know exactly what's coming this week, what's coming next week, But I think what's beautiful is that each program could have a different platform of curriculum. And this is what I mean by this. When you come into our fundamentals curriculum, it's very structured. You learn these three things, nothing else. This is what you're doing. We setting. I don't want you to think. I want you to show up. I want you to follow, and I'm going to stimulate you the way you need to be stimulated in order for you to start gaining these skills. So it's a very controlled environment. Our next level up, it's a little bit more troubleshooting. This is the guys who are blue belts, who've been on the mat for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever the case might be. There's some purple belts in there. These guys will have, we'll talk about, let's just say, concept of passing the guard. And then this is where we might talk about one technique, or we might talk about 5 techniques. Or there are some days that I will tell them, listen, here's a problem and I need you to solve it. And I'll go into your individual groups of 2 or 4, and I want you to troubleshoot this. And then we're going to come back as a class and we're going to figure this out. And I'm going to guide you where you need to go. But the goal is very different here. And then in our advanced program, we'll stay with a specific concept, like let's say spider guard or half guard or X guard, whatever the case might be, for literally 4-6 months. And we will dig deep into these concepts, right? And the goal here is to really, for you to become almost an expert in this one specific topic, right? So what I think was important here is that each program has a very different goal. This is where you selecting where you are and what you do is really, really important. So you come into fundamentals, expectations are clear. You come into, our intermediate program, the expectations are very different. There is a physical aspect of it, but you're also going to be stimulated. You're going to be thinking. If you don't like thinking, well, you're in the wrong sport, but you're wrong art. But you know what I'm going with this. If you really want to pick specific concept apart, well, then the advanced curriculum is probably the one for you, because we'll be there for literally 4 to 6 months. We're going to pick this apart from everywhere. So I think those things are important. Students know what to expect. They know what's expected of them. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the goal setting.
That's really good. Do you have any specific goals that you have for yourself right now, whether in jiu-jitsu, out of jiu-jitsu, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm huge on goal settings. I always have, several goals for myself personally, and then professionally, business wise, and then on the mat in jiu-jitsu, so continuously working on some of these things is really, really important to me, and especially, I know a lot of instructors will relate to this, but when you are in this instructor role, often, sometimes your training is one of the sacrifices that you make. Meaning, if I teach 20 hours a week, that means I'm not training 20 hours a week. And so one of my goals is to really be involved in our students, it really help them out, and we drive this to variety of different in the methods, whether it's seminars, workshop here internally, obviously, some of the platforms that you mentioned early on, whether it's a podcast or our online Roll TV, all that is my function has shifted to making sure that my students get the maximum benefit from what they do and set them for success. It's all about them at this point. At the same time, I love rolling. Like I need to get my rolls.
Mm-hmm.
So training is important. There's a very fine balance as we find ourselves in all this.
How often do you would you say you train, like, let's say, per week?
Anywhere between 4 to 6.
How old are you?
42.
42, man. So do you notice that it's harder to train that much at 42?
What are you talking about? I'm a machine. No, I'm
Good.
kidding. I'm kidding. It's interesting because I actually had this conversation with one of my students recently, a couple of weeks ago, and it's I think I started my 20s, and actually 20 or 19, I remember, or 20 plus years, but it for first 10 years, literally, like I could go 100% balls out for hours, and it was awesome. I think somewhere around 35 or so, things kind of changed, and I had a streak of injuries. I had, things kind of slowed down physically, but mentally I didn't. So like anytime I stepped on a mat, it was still I pushed. But the moment I got to somewhere around 39, 40, everything changed. So I started noticing things like, pains and aches here and there. It's not that I didn't want to or couldn't train. I just knew the consequence after the training was different than it was 10 years earlier. So awareness of taking care of your body, awareness of training smarter, the intensity or the length of training was more important. Recovery was important, and then, I think that also forced me to look at smart training, meaning let's focus on specific things that I'm working on versus just going balls out and trying to compete with some of the 20-year-olds who, well, let's be honest, some of them are tough, right? So it's interesting how your body changes mentally and physically as you go through this journey.
Any tips on, you mentioned recovery. Do you have any tips on recovery?
Yeah, so I think stretching is important. I'm a big fan of stretching before and after. So that's huge in my opinion. I learned the hard way. How you train is smart. So if you look at from training perspective, I look at it as you have these different methods of different mediums of training. And what I mean by this, you have a class that you go into and you'll do 2 or 3 techniques and you move around a little bit. You have open sparring, which intensity is really up to you and your partner. You have drilling sessions, right, which it's a little more physically and mechanically challenging, right? You have flow rolling sessions, which is not sparring, is not really drilling the technique, but it's more about transition and fluidity and really seeing the opportunities, and then you have things like seminars, right, which is kind of like a class, but it's much longer, often with a guest instructor, so it's a slightly different dynamic. You have things like private lessons. That's a very different thing from a class. It brings a very different value. So I think what's important for a student to know what the opportunities are in their environment and take advantage of what will benefit them the most, right? So seminars are not for everybody. They're not. They're a cool opportunity to meet people, but it doesn't mean that you're going to take away anything valuable as you're departing from the event, right? Sparring sessions are not for everybody. They're cool. We like to smash each other, but will you learn anything from it? Will you improve? Private lessons, they're not for everybody. They're not. Some people like them and some people don't like them. Like, and let's be honest, I mean, private lessons associated with a little bit more financial investment here, right? So
Mhm.
but there is a value behind each of these different methods. The question is, which one are you taking advantage of, and how are you benefiting yourself? Over again, this entire time I've been doing this, I know some students who don't want to come to classes. They just want to go to open training, and some will agree with that. Some of them won't agree with that. And the question is, are you stimulating yourself? Are you learning? Are you really gaining the benefit? Because ultimately, jiu-jitsu is not the cheapest hobby
Mhm.
out there, right? And if we are spending money for it, I would really encourage students to really look at the value that they're getting back, and coming to 2, 3, 4 open mats and just getting smashed or smashing somebody else. I don't know if that's a good way of spending that money, or really are you forget about the money for a moment, but are you benefiting from it from a stimulating perspective? Are you learning jiu-jitsu, right?
Mhm.
And if the answer is yes, well, more power to you. Good for you.
That is good. So I have just one question to finish with. We used to do a different finishing question, but after episode 100, this is 102. After episode 100, we switched it up. So I thought I would ask you, what is either the best or one of the best pieces of jujitsu advice that you have ever received, and who gave it to you?
Oh man, you got me here. Hold on, I
I
gotta
know
think
that's
about this
I
because
know it's a tough one.
because there's so many little things, in jiu-jitsu, as you continue learning and as you explore the art and all these dynamics that come with it. One, I know what it is. I know what it is. That keeps coming back to my mind all the time. Um, and this is going back probably 20 years or so, 18, 20 years. Beginning, I'm a white belt. And I remember I started my journey with Carlson Gracie Sr., so a pioneer of what we're doing today. And he had his academy in Chicago, was the probably one of handful of academies at that time, and any like drivable distance. There was few of them, but not that many. And I remember walking onto the mat, and we did class, and guys were sparring. And I remember I had a really frustrating day. And I don't remember what the reasoning was exactly, but I clearly, my body language was giving it out, and I had a hard time because I remember Carlson Sr. He goes, come, 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 come. And you've never met Carlson Sr. I mean, he, spoke about 20 English words, a lot of passion for jiu-jitsu, very honest man. And he just told you as it was. Okay. But he goes, come, 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 sit, sit. So I sit right next to him, and he goes, bad day. I was like, no, no, no. And he goes, yeah, yeah, bad day. You, bad day. And I was like, okay, all right. He goes, listen, we have bad days and we have good days. The trick is to have more good days than bad days. And goes, go train. And that stuck with me for a very, very long time. And in such a simple way, he had the ability to, one, make you smile, but two, to really challenge you, the way that in the ways that you were stuck in. Sometimes we are so hyper focused on this moment right now that we don't see and we don't appreciate everything right around us. And similar to jiu-jitsu in life, there are days where we have hard time. There are days that will struggle no matter what we do. But there are days where we have phenomenal days. And I think appreciating those good days is offsets that scale and really allows us to have a greater appreciation for life, especially as we continue to going through the journey and as we're going through life. Listen, my dad used to say, life is too short to be pissed off. Just have a good day. And in a very simple way, Carson Sr. had that ability to, one, make you smile, and two, really kind of set you back right on the track. So I remember that day, literally right after the conversation, jumping back into sparring sessions, and they continued on. But that stuck with me for a very long time to this day.
That is an excellent piece of advice. I just want to thank you for being on the show. Is there anything you want to say to finish? Anything people can kind of follow you on, or anything like that?
Oh no! Thank you for having me here. Phenomenal conversation. I'm glad we were able to connect. And I feel like this is an honor to be on your show. It's like you are the it.
uh, Man, thank you so much. I really can't express to you enough how much I enjoyed this conversation. I think that this is one of the conversations too that you don't get those on podcasts all the time, but I think that having an episode that I think would be not only really good for the student, but really good for academy owners is unique. And I feel like there was so much content on this episode for academy owners. And I just can't thank you enough for that, man.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with the show. I'm a big fan, and I'm looking forward to hearing this.
And that is the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was a blast to talk to Thomas and to just get to hear his perspective. He had a very unique perspective on training and progression and goal setting. I think there's just a lot of things that we talked about, but it was a really enjoyable interview. I really loved doing it. Before you guys go, I just had a thought. I'm going to probably mention this quite a bit for the next few months, but keep in mind, a lot of our friends start jiu-jitsu because of depression. A lot of people that we know struggle with depression. And this time of year, when it starts to get cold and the holidays approach, is from a lot of my friends that I know that struggle with depression, they recognize this is the hardest time of year. So if you are noticing that there are certain people at your gym that are not there anymore, that they stopped coming and stopped being involved and just seem distant, reach out to those people. I know it's not something that we talk about a ton. We've done a mental health month before, but it's not something we talk about a crazy amount, but it's incredibly important. And you do not realize the effect that you can have by just being a friend to the people that you are friends with, and kind of sharing an ear, and also trying to get them to come train. Trying to express to them that you miss them, that things are better when they are there. But that's my little 1-minute mental health rant. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope you guys are enjoying the show, enjoying the new music, the new little tweaks that we made before after episode 100, or after episode 99, I guess. And most importantly, I hope that you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys. What's up, guys? Josh here again. I just wanted to give you a little more information on some of the other content that I produce that isn't just the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. If you are wanting more information on how to become more efficient and effective in your jiu-jitsu training, the number one thing that I always recommend to people is my Patreon page, the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show Patreon page, because we release a 5 to 15 minute exclusive episode every single Saturday. This is called Suck Less Saturday, and it is completely focused on being for your jiu-jitsu training, for your jiu-jitsu mindset, and for your jiu-jitsu progression. And so what we'll do is a quick but deep dive on a different thought, idea, or training method every single Saturday. And you can only get this on our Patreon page. I also have a few spots open, depending on what time you're listening to this podcast, for my Suck Less coaching. What that is a monthly cost to get a monthly meeting with me where we meet over Zoom and set some goals based on what you are trying to accomplish in jiu-jitsu, and set some different training methods to help you get there. There's nothing like this online right now. There is no jiu-jitsu coaching that teaches you how you should be training. And it is exclusively on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Patreon page. Also, if you guys want to just be in more contact or you want to learn a little more about my ideas in Jiu-Jitsu, I highly recommend that you sign up for Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. It is a free ebook. It is at simplifyingjujitsu.com. And what we do is we break down the top 5 positions, the essential 5 positions of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. These are the 5 positions where most Jiu-Jitsu, 90+% of Jiu-Jitsu takes place in. And we break down how to train them, how long you should be training them, and what order you can train these things to progress faster and easier with your Jiu-Jitsu. And lastly, if you guys would just give this show a subscribe and a share, it would be very greatly appreciated. Also, you can review us on certain podcast platforms. If you guys want to keep up with me personally, you can follow me at my Instagram at @thejoshmckinney. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening. I hope that you guys listen to the next one.